All right, so thanks, Tom, and welcome to everyone joining us for this webinar. Our topic is the application of A3s to support the development of problem-solving skills in either your specialist belts or managers. I'm hoping to spend about 35 minutes on the presentation and then follow that up with any questions from any of our listeners today. It's not going to be really an intensive lesson on using A3s, as there's plenty of information out there online or in books. The focus of this webinar is understanding the effective use of A3s in a broader approach, with the outcome specifically of getting genuine improvement in processes and developing problem-solving practice and a culture throughout the business using effective coaching. So there's a variety of A3s, A3P for standard work improvement, A3Ts for team charters, etc. But I'm not going to go through Hoshin Canry or Hoshin planning. Rather, I'm just going to focus on the use of A3s for embedding scientific problem solving, either through Six Sigma to Make or more conventional TQM or Lean PDSA or PDCA through structured coached learning. And I'm certainly a user and advocate of the broader use of A3s in planning and strategy, but won't be covering that aspect today. My goal really is to leave you with an appreciation of the value of coaching with A3s and understanding how you might obtain the competency of coaching through A3s for your organisation. So I'll just provide a little bit of background about myself, probably quite unconventional in process improvement. I'm actually a systems ecologist, so I'm a botanist and soil scientist, and that's just a photo of me out doing my field research over a decade ago in native forests, doing forestry research, collecting stem flow and then analysing the movement of nutrients after certain fire regimes. So a bit of an unconventional beginning for process improvement. But I made the move to chemical manufacturing, technical services, into knowledge management, strategy and business planning, performance measurement, and finally into process improvement through learning of Six Sigma and Lean. I then made a specific switch into services improvement, including government, financial services, utilities and transport, and eventually working with Tom to earn my Master Black Belt. Now, I've also additionally had some really great coaches, including Tom and others like Professor John Seddon of Vanguard, who have really helped my development, as well as using the Lean Enterprise Institute to access Toyota over several years. In fact, I last visited Toyota only a couple of weeks ago at the end of May. I currently work in public transport as a coach and advisor to senior executives, department and team managers on their business strategy and planning, their performance measurement and process improvement. And this role sees me coach other improvement practitioners in the business as well.
Kevin?
And to define the methods and tools of process. Yes?
I do have someone
I can
who
hear
is
Tom.
saying that it's difficult to hear you. It says it sounds muffled. I can hear you fine, but maybe if you could speak a little louder, turn your volume up a little bit, that might be helpful.
Sure. How's that?
Okay, that sounds good on my end. Anyone else having issues, let me know. We'll see if we can fix it.
Okay. So just to finish up there, so I use A3s on a daily basis. In fact, of yesterday, I spent 2 hours coaching through A3, so it's a routine activity for me, so I'm quite an advocate for it. I just wanted to quickly show this, that this is just a photo of myself, and there I am hiding behind my beard and PPE gear, but I make regular trips to Toyota facilities, and this is a photo of me with the entire safety department team, including their director, and we spent half the day with the HR and safety team. So I'm not presenting my own academic view of A3 problem solving. It's something I have mastered from first-hand learning experience, being within the Toyota system and several years of application of coaching others in problem solving. So this is where I'm sharing my experience from real-world learning of Toyota. So the agenda that I wanted to cover today, it's quite a lot there, but I'm just going to do a bit of a shallow dive into each of these sections. So I'm first going to talk about, in my view, what are the integrated benefits of A3s, and I think there are multiple benefits, how it powers improvement and makes Lean Six Sigma more effective. I'll talk about the common failings I see in deployments with A3. It's very, very, very common that organisations struggle to make the A3 work. How the A3 is used for the coachee to learn the problem-solving method, and this could be reinforcing training or getting trainees unstuck. I'll talk about coaching to problem solve, and this is how the master uses frequent coaching using the A3 and why that works so well. How the A3 enables collaboration and really how it helps bridge the functional divide, and I've got many stories to help you understand how the A3 does help collaboration. A bit on communication, I find it really does reduce noise and gets cut through for learning and change. I'll talk briefly about deployment, some advice on getting started, and finally I'll round that out with how you might embed A3s in your business, and I talk about through the management system or your general management approach. So I'll get straight into the first point. So the integrated benefit. So this simple conceptual model of why and how A3s glue and power process improvement. So I'm assuming the organisation is drawing on some form of scientific method. So whether it's a formal Six Sigma program using the DMAIC cycle, more conventional TQM or Lean using PDCA or PDSA. You've decided to adopt A3s as a method for your organisation, and either presently or maybe as an outcome of this webinar you will be wanting to formalise coaching method and roles. So this is the skeleton of the concept I talk about. So without doubt, the organisation's got to bring a robust problem-solving method and process to the business. Now, I don't get involved in debates about DMAIC versus PDSA, and that's my experience with successful practitioners. My advice is simply choose your method and begin. Not having a practical working quality management system as well is going to be a common problem here. But having an invented method, I find, is the enemy. So this is where I do advocate formal Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma training, providing the fundamental concepts, method, tools and process to enable your method to work. So secondly, and how I see A3s really working in this concept is A3s really do bring that scientific method to life. And why I say that is that A3s help standardise the practice of DMAIC or PDSA. It almost provides a rapid setup for improvement, and the A3 brings the unfolding problem solving to stakeholders in a concise, accessible and collaborative way. The problem solving steps are really obvious, the progress is visible, and it really does reinforce the particular scientific method the business uses. And this is where I find it supports training investment by standardising that method that you've invested in. And I do find it helps practitioners who are sometimes paralysed throughout their progress move through that improvement cycle. And just as an example, yesterday I had a coaching session with a department manager using the method I'm talking about here. And she was so grateful of the progress made and that it was actually her work and thinking through coaching that actually made the breakthrough in allowing her to progress. So this is real stuff. So next on this model, I would say that the A3s really do enable effective coaching. And fundamentally I say that because what I say is you can see how the A3 owner is thinking and approaching problem solving. Thus, I would argue the A3 makes coaching far simpler, structured, and focused activity for either expert practitioners, so your green belts and black belts, or managers if that's the pathway you're taking. Now, I commonly ask to see the A3 about 15 minutes prior to a coaching session, but I can also, if we're through a good A3, I can also digest it very quickly at the start of a meeting. But through that, I can see whether they went to the Gemba to see the problem firsthand. I can see whether they attempted to understand the problem by effectively studying it, or whether they just simply captured perceptions of the problem. I can also see the correct application of the problem-solving methods and tools, and I can judge if a person is really learning or whether they're just jumping through hoops. And it's at this point that I can coach or provide feedback and advice on the A3's ability to cut through with the business to make real improvement. So this is how the A3 makes the manager or coaching development a value-added process. And lastly, my position is that coaching embeds the continuous improvement method in the organisation, and it really does help this by making process improvement visible, accessible and effective, and it really means I believe your continuous improvement program reaches more people more quickly and more effectively. And it's really simple to integrate A3s into daily standard management work if that's how your program is evolving, to embed it in visual management, and to really have it with a direct connection to your visible quality and throughput metrics. This regular structured feedback in the form of good questions that develop the A3's owner's capability builds good problem-solving routine into management work, and it reinforces effective problem-solving with a balance on thoroughness of method and speed. So it sounds very easy, and this is a common story I talk to people about. Simple, but it's very difficult to do right. It's common for us to tell, to convey our own stories, but it's important in coaching to ask and not tell. And the power of A3s help us to make sure we can simplify a story to get cut through with the business. So I'll talk now, I'll talk now about the common failings with A3s. But first I just want to set a bit of context here of perhaps why this topic is so important. Now my view is that our education system, both in Australia and in the US and yes?
I have a question, and I was going to ask it on the last slide. Can you simply tell us what A3 is?
Sorry, yeah, sure. So yeah, A3, it's a very, very good question. The A3, yes, really is that A3 sheet of paper. It is actually the ISO standard size of A3, and why it's used just throughout history, that size and has evolved to be a great format for storyboarding and containing the unfolding story of problem solving. So it really is that simple. It is simply that A3 sheet of paper, but is given structure either through DMAIC or 8-step PDSA.
Okay,
so not explaining that.
So in our equivalent size of paper is 11 by 17. So A3 is just creating a visual story that can be portrayed on a single large sheet of paper.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no more magical mystery to it other than that, but that general size of paper you'll tend to see standardized throughout Toyota, in my experiences, both for display of metrics as well as display of problem solving. And it really has just landed that way, that it's an effective size to convey a really clear message.
And graphical too, right?
Sorry?
Graphically portray the message.
Exactly, yeah, and I'll get on to some of my suggestions for content, but yeah, it really does allow. It's just the right size to ensure that you get a very crystal clear message in what you've discovered in your problem solving and the change you're attempting to make.
Okay, great.
And I think one of the common reasons of failing, and I'll couch this in a very early statement, is that what I see in the organisation is that there has been a decline in the education system over the past 20 to 30 years, and you see this where teaching has gone from students learning to pass tests, and this has been driven by well-intentioned KPIs that have really corrupted education. And the consequence is that you'll see people entering your business who do need to be taught problem solving. It is not a inbuilt skill and you have to develop it. And often you'll see a reluctance to address this issue, to develop that coaching skill. And my statement is, what I hear is, what if we train all our managers or practitioners just to problem solve when they leave the organisation? And a better question I would pose is, what if we don't train all our managers or practitioners to improve processes and they all stay? So it's really important. It's the organisation's responsibility to train its people. So just based on that bit of concept, what I commonly see with how organisations fail with A3s is they really fail to understand the principles of what an A3 is actually doing. So the purpose is not understood. You'll often see this mandatory requirement to use A3s, which is just filling out an A3 to comply, but this is not going to help. It's not going to help develop the problem solving and change management in your organisation, or it's simply just viewed as a template. So you'll see the exact same behaviours in the business rushing to solution mode and not spending time on quality problem solving. So this is not going to help either. And typically you'll see a poor deployment, that the A3 will end up as corporate wallpaper with empty routine. So everybody's doing it, but you're not going to see good scientific method and problem solving with the use of A3s. Effective A3 use is deliberate and it's supported by good coaching. So just a little bit about what does good content look like in that A3 or that similar format. What I say is that the content is not constrained, but what you're looking for is good visual content, and so this is mostly going to be made up of diagrams such as floor maps, flow diagrams, charts, analysis, and these are really preferred over text. And what I say to people is, remember this: if it's difficult to read, I'm not going to read it and you will not get what you want. So use text sparingly throughout the A3, because what I see commonly is that the more text that enters an A3, the more an audience begins to perceive it as being subjective and not fact-based. So I'll reiterate, there's not a strict format for the content, but you're aiming for good visual content that conveys the message of what you've learnt throughout problem solving. And what I'll say is that there's actually a lot of lean embedded in the A3 method that you probably would appreciate, and this is part of the reason why the A3 I feel works so well. And what I would say to people is, it does help in reduction of variation in continuous improvement by giving a standardized format for your methodology. It helps practitioners or managers with a rapid setup. So that same standardized format, I find it helps the owner of the A3 get moving a lot quicker. I think it also leads to lead time reduction, so I often see projects progress a lot faster through to decision making and implementation because of the clarity that the A3 provides. It provides visual control, particularly if you're a coach, that through that standardized format I can quickly see whether there's a deviation to good problem solving method. There's also a lot of error proofing built into the A3, and that's through concise, clear communication. It's very easy to spot problems in the problem solving method itself. So for a coach or a manager, very powerful. And it also helps eliminate waste. So there's very little space for distraction and vague content. A good A3 eliminates the noise and communicates the really important aspects of the problem solving.
Question?
Sure.
One of the attendees is asking, is the A3 always one page as a snapshot, or can there be multiple pages?
My advice here on this question is that yes, the constraint of the one sheet of paper is forcing you to be very clear about what you know. And it's a common question I'll get from people I'm coaching, and I'll often say, particularly that the CEO is going to see this A3. The CEO is not interested in the roar of a cannon, only where the cannonball lands. And what I mean by that is I understand that the belt or the problem solver is going to have lots of work behind the A3, but the A3's purpose is to clearly communicate your understanding, to ensure that you're doing good problem solving. So by allowing the work to spill outside of one page, you're probably losing some of the benefits. And it is common early on in developing the skill of A3 that you'll want to write more, but that very constraint of the A3 forces you to be very, very explicit and clear. So my advice would be to stick to the A3 or to a similar one-page format, if that helps you.
Okay. Richard, there's your answer.
Now, I just wanted to quickly say that I've had experience using both DMAIC and PDSA and A3, so I don't want to spend a lot of time with this, but it's very easy to incorporate the A3 in just about any improvement program. And this visual gives an approximate balance, but it's not really a strict rule, and the proportions move as you progress through the problem solving. So the benefits hold true whether you're in a pure Six Sigma or a lean Six Sigma program. And I'll just complete that out by saying that Plan, Do, Study, Act, or Plan, Do, Check, Act, it's a very similar story that I will typically use the 8-step method with an A3, and generally that's sort of the balance of what an A3 will be made up of in its final version. And I'll just show also the basic A3 template that I tend to use. So it's very very open. The only thing I tend to ask the owner to do is to give me a very clear statement of the problem, but other than that, the content evolves as the problem solving emerges. And what I'll do also is give you a real sneak peek of a template. Now, I don't tend to show people this. It's my own, as I evolve the coaching process, these are some of the key points I would tend to use with the coachee. And it's just very much based on making sure the problem-solving owner understands what we're doing in each phase, some simple ideas for how to visualize, and some of the key outcomes of each step. So it's not a template I tend to communicate, it's a bit of my coaching cheat sheet, and this has just evolved over several years of the key points I tend to make as I'm helping someone through the A3 process. So just touching now on coming back to the problem owner or the coachee in this instance, that how the A3 helps that learning of problem-solving method. When you're using A3s here, the important thing is that the coach themselves has mastered the problem-solving approach. So again, whether it's the DMAIC or Plan, Do, Study, Act, it's very important that you're using A3 for coaching, that someone has mastered, the coach has mastered the method. Now, this is where the classroom training does support the method, and I must say that Toyota does use structured training. It's not everything is learnt through the A3. That structured training is really helpful for getting your practitioners moving with basic concept, and whether that starts with just a few simple methods and tools such as check sheets and control charts, Pareto charts, fishbones, there's some fundamental learning that the coachee or the problem solver must draw upon. And so for the A3, the subordinate or the coachee is following a structured problem-solving method. And early on, this is where they're following a conscious practice. They may be referring back to their content of their training, or referring to the organisation's structured problem-solving. But it is, the A3 does help that practitioner learn and reinforce the method of problem-solving. How the coach actually works in this process is that through the A3, the coach, which may be a manager or a master black belt in the business, is that they're going to instill that scientific method in their coachee. And this is where we're changing from telling, which may be useful in some instances, but generally if we're talking about using A3s for development, we're switching to asking questions. And this is a real skill to develop. Some of the listeners may have heard of humble inquiry. It's a very common terminology for A3 application in a lean system, and that's really about asking exploratory questions, and it's allowing the coachee to reflect on what and how they know something. Now, these are not weak questions, they're very purposeful questions, but often they're described as dumb questions that you really are exploring as a coach how that person has discovered what they know, and is it really solid information. And the A3 is the basis of this coaching formula. It allows you to see what the learner is thinking, and allows a much easier coaching approach. And a common question I get is, so how frequently am I going to use the A3 or the coaching technique? And what I would generally recommend here is the frequency of your coaching interaction is determined by the next step. So whether you're using a formal project plan or whether it's more of a verbal agreement, that if something's going to take another 2 days, I'm going to go to the Gemba and study the flow, and we agree that's the next step, then my next coaching step's probably going to be in 2 days. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to understand what the problem solver has learnt and understands, and are they ready to communicate through the A3 what they've learnt. But I'll put in place a caveat here that if the next step is perhaps a 2 to 3 week data collection exercise, so we're going to execute a measurement plan, then I'm not going to allow the problem solver to have no contact for that 2 weeks. I'll check in just to make sure that things are progressing, to ensure that the problem solver understands and is problem solving within the measurement plan. But generally that's the step, is that it's defined by the next step activity in the problem solving process. So on to how A3s enable collaboration. What I say here is that it brings clear and simple information to the table of those who need to support the improvement. So commonly you're working across functional groups in the organisation, and through the A3 it makes that working together very easy. If you've coached to get clarity, there's very little or no blame, and it's very fact-based, and you'll commonly see functions more accepting of what the problem solving has discovered. So that sequence of the A3, that standardising your problem-solving method, also helps people throughout the business understand where you are in the process of problem-solving, so it allows them to buy in and get involved much simpler. And I encourage managers or practitioners to carry that A3 with them, to use it in a discussion as they're meeting people, rather than using presentations which tend to exclude people. And this is one of the gems of the A3, this open, collaborative way of getting people involved in the problem-solving process. Don't underestimate the power of A3 for this particular point. So how does it affect communication? So the A3 is very, very powerful in enabling communication. And when I talk about communication, I'm also talking about organisational learning, that rather than having all this knowledge buried in a 30-page report, on one page. It crystallises what the organisation has learnt about this problem. So it makes knowledge sharing and learning far more accessible for the organisation and to leverage that in other areas of the business. So the coaching here is about honing that A3 for absolute clarity, that it is easy for people to understand what we've discovered and learnt in this process. And again, this is where I'll reiterate, the more text in an A3 is more ambiguity, and I'll commonly see that audiences see a sense of subjectivity when they see a lot of text in an A3. However, if it's a very good visual story, I often see a lot more acceptance and objective view of what the A3 message is really about. So A3 really does power communication and learning throughout the organisation. A little about process improvement itself now. A3's really about problem solving. So after your first priority of developing people, your other priority is getting results. So we don't use A3s just for the sake of it. A3 should be driving real problem solving and outcomes in your organisation. It's not an end to itself. We're not going to use A3s as a corporate routine, a checkbox that really should be driving improvement. So if your A3s are not delivering results, we need to look at what's gone wrong there. It also, for your entire program, what I commonly see of having trained many green and black belts and managers to that fact is I typically see much faster development and practice, so your training investment is leveraged a lot sooner through effective use of the A3 methodology. So just now talking about deployment, how does this actually look? How do you use coaching in A3s? How do you get started? As I began in my first conceptual discussion, you must have a standard improvement method, and this is where conventional training is supported by the coaching method. Now, middle managers will do what's important to their bosses, so if A3s and scientific method aren't part of their practice, it won't happen in the middle and lower levels of management. So you're really going to need this scientific method or training through the business and the coaching that supports it. Now, what I suggest here is that you may need to take a very objective view of your business and assess your internal coaching capability, because in truth you may require outside help to develop these coaching skills. I've commonly seen coaches selected because of their technical expertise or their tenure in the business, but this is no guarantee that they're an effective coach, and in fact often they're not interested in coaching. So be cautious about your assessment of whether the organisation has the capability to provide coaches, and you may need to seek outside help here. Particularly, I do a lot of coaching of senior executives, and it's a very, very difficult space to coach in. So often having that external coach where you don't have a subordinate problem is very important for ensuring you deploy a really effective coaching A3 methodology. A bit of a story here. I've previously worked in an organisation that attempted to bring coaching to a business, drawing on the GROW model of coaching. Now, this was executed through a 3-day training program for all managers in the business, and this included the executive team. But unfortunately, without follow-up of an experienced outside coach, the coaching behaviour never established itself. So my advice here is be objective and consider an external investment in coaching competency here. So I'll just move on to this last point about how you are going to embed A3s as normal practice in the business. My advice, and I spent a couple of hours again on this exact bit of work yesterday, is that in order to standardise A3s is to ensure it's used in coaching, it's part of your coaching method and it's used during coaching. But there are other ways to embed the A3 approach and to get better standardisation of your continuous improvement program. And so commonly I'll bring A3s into visual management. So part of my work is to set up standard visual management for each team and each level in the business. And A3s are attached to metrics. So we'll either see an A3 as a top-down initiative coming out of business planning, or it's bottom-up daily standard work improvement. But by attaching it to your business management system, your measurement and objectives is a powerful way to link it into standard work. And really the way you see Toyota using A3s is that approach, that it's part of top-down Hoshin planning as well as bottom-up standard work improvement. It makes it part of the planning approach in the business. So that's what I talk about, adding it to your management ecosystem so it becomes standard work. So I'll just wrap this up with some key points of my experience in A3s and some of the challenges that practitioners will face. I say that A3 thinking may be counterintuitive to the organisation. This is a lot of similar to general lean principles that people will often take their existing practice and simply put it into the A3. So telling will be very much part of the process. So you're not going to get that development of people. So devote time to understanding how A3s work as a comprehensive system inside your larger management method. A3s take two people. If people are just filling these out, they're desktop exercises. These are not going to help you. It takes two. It's a coach and learner routine that the organisation will use. Point three, it really is about developing people. However, you really are driving process improvement. We're not just doing A3s as a compliance activity. It takes practice. I would say that it takes possibly nearly a year to develop that real competence, particularly if your deployment is not using green and black belts. Perhaps you're deploying it through the management line, that A3 isn't expect that relationship of coaching may take up to a year and sometimes more to develop the practice. And finally, you are constantly driving to develop clear fact-based A3s. And if you've ever had the opportunity to sit inside an Obeya in Toyota, it's almost a competitive spirit in the room, that the aim to develop the most clear, well understood problem description through an A3. So the coach is helping the coachee understand what have we learned through this process, and what are the key messages we need to communicate to the business to get that improvement. So that I'll wrap that up there with those key messages. So Tom, if we wanted to move to any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. I want to thank you for getting up so early in the morning or staying up so late, and you sounded remarkably awake. So it was a great presentation. I do have several questions, and I'll present them to you, and you can go ahead and field them. So the first one would be from Ruth, and she wonders what you mean when you say go to Gemba.
Okay, sorry. So go to Gemba, very much a lean terminology. So this is where the work is. So if you're improving a process, we're not going to solve it in our office at arm's length with data out of our reporting system. We want to clarify what we know about the problem. So go and see the process as it works and talk to people and observe it. So the Gemba is very much where the problem solving in the process itself.
Okay, thank you. Question from Dillian. Isn't it more efficient if we use past projects for the coaching? And he elaborates, are we including, well, he has a second question, a follow-on, so we'll start with that. Isn't it more efficient if we use past projects for the coaching?
I love this question because it very much is the challenging contradiction is that when we use A3s, we really are thinking about a long-term investment. Yes, it would be more efficient, but I think what that is talking about is more of the telling and using examples. But what we're not getting through that methodology is you're not developing the person's own ability. So by using examples, you're providing, you're shortcutting the learning process. And again, it's very tempting to do that, and sometimes it's wise to do. So if coaching, if through an A3 the coachee is going to make a mistake that's going to affect quality and it's going to affect the customer, then we may bring the process improvement back into control. However, if the mistake is going to be safe for the organisation, so it presents very little risk to customers or safety to the employee, then we let them fail, because it's that development that is really important. So it's a balancing act. You must make that decision. But very, very important question. It's a challenge for people who are considering using A3s.
Okay, thank you. A question from Saad. Do you fill out the A3 as you go through each phase and have check-ins with your coach after each phase?
Exactly, precisely. The A3 is, if an A3 ends up on the coach's desk at the end of the process, you've basically missed the coaching opportunity. So yes, and this is where you have to establish coaches in the organisation. The coach has to understand their role, because our value adding as a coach is we help. We support the learner through the problem-solving process as they progress through it. So I've had scenarios where I've had to spend 7 weeks coaching a manager to simply delegate enough work so they can spend time coaching. So coaching is not an easy proposition. To make it work, that coach needs to have time in every day in order to respond to coaching opportunities. But the short answer to the question, yes, we do coach as an ongoing progress as the A3 is developing. So as the problem solving's moving through the steps, we're coaching it on each step. So yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. A follow-on from Dillian. Are we including all the used tools in the process, including the ones that did not provide results on the A3?
It's tempting. It's very common especially for people new to A3s, to want to demonstrate all the work they've done. However, we've got to think about the audience with your A3. What is it people need to know? What does the organisation need to learn? So the organisation will understand that there's lots of work that has gone on in the background of this project. I employ good people. I trust that they're doing good work. So the A3 is designed to crystallise and make it very clear what we know and what the organisation needs to learn in order to change. So my answer to that is no. Be careful of what you put in there. You may confuse your audience, and that the real upside benefit of the A3, and I see this constantly, and in fact I've got a great example of only 2 weeks ago, a 4-year-old problem in the business, a real difficult problem to solve, that by working for 3 weeks with a manager to crystallise what they really understood of the problem in a very objective way, they finally got breakthrough with another function who actually needed to do the work. But that manager's temptation was to bring lots of content into the A3 and make it confusing. So this is part of the journey of practice of A3s. We really want to focus on good quality content that is about the receiver of the message, not about the work we've done.
Okay, thank you. David asks, what is Obeya?
Sorry again, yeah, I do apologise. So I'm bringing terminology here. So the Obeya, sometimes you'll hear it called a green room. This is a management visualisation room. I haven't presented a photo, but a very, very common Toyota principle is that if you're going to have business information, that are you actually using it So the abayas are structured rooms with structured content with a routine behaviour. So commonly we'll have from the president's goals and business plan through to projects and metrics throughout the business, and regular routine structured review of the progress of the plan and progress of improvement. So it's like visualizing your entire management system on a board, and it seems very old school, old-fashioned, but there's a very simple concept in visual management that if you have to go look for information, you probably won't. So the concept of a Bayer is to make the important information in running your business or improving your processes visible, and it's what we describe as understanding at a glance is the purpose of an obeyer. So it's part of the structured Toyota routine of using business information.
Okay, and the last question, and it's a good one. What is the best approach to implement the A3 methodology in a corporate environment that is not Six Sigma or Lean trained? Do you simply train the management and rely on their assistance, or do you provide full-on training for the entire staff?
Okay, it's a tricky question. It's a common one that I'm faced with. Most organisations I work with have chosen not to deploy green and black belts. So currently I'm with an organisation that believes improvement should be owned by managers and has preferred not to deploy formal training. So, however, my belief is that there's a certain amount of basic training, and I qualified this with Toyota only a couple of weeks ago, that fundamental training is important, but too much may be a little bit, may overwhelm people. But it isn't always necessary. If you're in a position in charge of an improvement deployment where you're not getting organisational or executive support to run a large program, it can still work. I often bring A3s into an organisation in an unauthorised way, and what I mean is the A3 was not part of the formal deployment, but I use it as my coaching practice, and it becomes normal and standardised in the business. And my ongoing coaching, I can bring the tools and methodology of DMAIC or PDSA into it, but I do have a firm belief that training, a fundamental skill set, is important in a really successful program. But if you are facing that challenge, the A3 may be a very useful way of getting progress and even highlighting the gap in some of those fundamental skills. So common dilemma, but an A3 could help you in that situation.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kevin. At this point, I'm going to give Kevin his last congratulations on delivering a great presentation. I'm going to end the webinar and stop the recording. We should have the recording posted in the next day or two, and all of you will receive an email that has a link to the recording and a link to the content of the presentation. This was a great presentation. I'm very happy that you could all attend, and very thankful to Kevin for delivering this. So with no further ado, I'll end the webinar, and thank you very much for attending and presenting.